1979 was the year of Watership Down.
Well, I'm Alan Simpson. I was one of the key animators on the film. Colin joined about the same time as me.
I did indeed. Well, no, I came much later. I joined much later. I'm Colin White, and I was an assistant for most of the film, and then towards the end I got bunged up to being an animator to do corrections and stuff. So, as animators, we would sit down, we'd look at the storyboard, we'd have the soundtrack, which is pre-recorded, which gives the timing for the whole film, and also, you know, the voices of the actors give you a lot of kind of inspiration for how you're going to act the scene. And then the animators would sit down and, you know, in their myopic little world and draw.
Oh, yeah.
I worked on the backgrounds on Watership Down. That was it. I think I was on the film for about 6 or 7 months. Very enjoyable experience, and it was great fun. It's a big picture, so we all wanted to work on it, and I was glad I was on it.
I didn't work on the film from the beginning. I wanted to, but like Dennis was saying, it was a very popular thing. It was the first feature for some time in London, and I worked maybe the last year of the production. I was a background artist, so you're painting pictures on flat surfaces that'll go behind the animation superimposed over the top. On top of that, you're creating atmosphere.
Yeah, it's your job to make the whole thing come alive, really, you know, give the animators something to work on as well as their own characters, and it's up to us to make the whole picture look great.
The animators would be sitting listening to the soundtrack, quite often voicing the dialogue themselves or mouthing the dialogue, and or hopping around the studio trying to time themselves.
Wearing fur coats.
But I mean, you do kind of act it out, and you listen to the soundtrack a lot and try and get the character and what the essence of the scene is. Just listening to the characterization, and the actors are quite inspiring. Sometimes you film the actors doing the voice recording so you can look at them, because when you're doing it, they act, they move around, and their facial expressions and things.
I was surprised at the style that was used, because and that was what was so refreshing, because it was much more like a brilliant drawing than a brightly coloured oil painting.
It's always a difficult thing on a feature animated film for backgrounds. It's a larger production, you know, and to get all those background artists painting in the same style is always difficult, and you never achieve it.
You start off, obviously, all trying to pitch together and work in the same style, but gradually, as the picture goes on, your own style creeps in and things start to drift, and then you've got to get it all back together again. Dennis
and myself, we could go through Watership Down and other movies that we worked on. We know straight away, not just what are our backgrounds, but other people's. You can pick them out.
I mean, sometimes on animated films, an individual animator will be given an individual character to animate throughout the film, but because this was very much a story about a group of rabbits, more often than not, you had at least 3 or 4 of the rabbits in the same shot, so it just wasn't possible to do that. But having said that, George Jackson kind of did a lot of Fiverr and Hazel together, and he developed Fiverr so that it was very identifiable, very nervous, very sort of paranoid character.
I know what we ought to be looking for. A high, lonely place with dry soil.
And a lot of that came out of his animation, so I would try and be sympathetic to the way he had animated Fiverr. And the same thing with Arthur Humberstone did a lot of Bigwig.
Well, come along then.
Well, some people do prefer to do the structured stuff, you know, like stonework. Some guys like doing barns, interiors, woodwork. Other people preferred landscapes, or the tunnels where the rabbits lived, you know. So you try and... It kind of panned out so that people got what they would prefer to paint as much as possible, or specialise in. But other than that, I mean, I think most of us did a bit of everything, really, you know. I mean, the stonework on the bridges was quite old, crusty stonework with moss and lichen growing in it, so it's quite nice to paint. It kind of knitted in with the landscape really well.
I missed out on the reconnaissance trip that they made to the Watership Down itself.
But there was a huge reference pile of photographs and drawings and sketches they'd done, which we were, you know, were there for us to look at every day, all the time. So if different sequences came along you were working on, you could go to the reference book and you knew exactly where you were. You know, maps were up, so you knew where you were.
I did actually like drawing Keyhole.
Keyhole was fun.
Rather than the rabbits. I think maybe because it came at a point in the film where we've been drawing rabbits for about a year, so we all wanted to draw the seagull.
Fed up with them. Yeah.
And Zero Mostel was fantastically over the top as Keyhole.
He tell me the plan. I know the plan.
Keyhole was probably the most animatable.
And he's the only
character.
humorous character, and
Yeah.
so it's easy to make the character look funny. You know, he's got that over-the-top thing, or the big water.
Yes, exactly.
Because he's such a larger-than-life character, he does stuff with his wings that no seagull would ever do.
Wing better, I go fly. Fly for you.
Favourite character? I think the little Pipkin was my... I just found him nice to draw, just personally. Pipkin and Hazel. But...
Yeah, I don't know. I just whatever's under the pencil. Really, I quite like doing.
Yeah, well, what ones I've just remembered of mine were the rabbits come to the edge of a field, and one of them takes the fox off to cause a diversion, and there's a sort of foxglove and a barbed wire fence, and then they go off through a farmer's field and then go over a nice kind of landscape with the seagull flying above and up to the railway arch. I was quite pleased with that one.
The backgrounds or the sequence I most enjoyed on the film, and the biggest section I had for me to do, was the Ephraven Warren, the burrows, and the exterior shots there. Obviously, the direction for me was to make it sinister, because it was the baddies, as it were. So I could go into town on the burrows inside and make them quite surrealist. You know, they were very smooth and polished, and if there were tree roots sticking through, they were much more jagged, and, you know, it was almost like painting in abstracts.
When the project began, Martin Rosen brought in John Hubley, the renowned independent animator, to work on this picture.
But then I think he was worried that John was making not the film that Martin wanted. And, yeah, so then Tony Guy was brought in to direct, who's a well-known British animator.
Watership Down broke all the rules. Before this film, you had the Disney films with their comic relief and their cartoon characters and cute morals. The movie had more respect for an audience than the normal cartoons have.
It was a different kind of film in the sense that this was using animals in a different way, and it was like making some attempt to show a certain realism in the way that, in this instance, rabbits lived.
I think Watership Down was way ahead of its time in many ways. You didn't have a number of celebrities doing voices, but people used to go to see the movie to get the story. With Watership Down, it was an honest portrayal of the book, and it kept to the book, and that is what I found so exciting about it.
There are some very violent scenes in there. There's death. There's blood. But he didn't. I think he was right to do that. I think that's part of the strength of it. And even like we were talking about the opening sequence being very different stylistically. Again, it's in the book. There are these myths that the rabbits tell each other, which are kind of the backstory about how rabbits are created and how they're. It's almost like their Bible stories or their mythology. Yeah.
And there were gasps of horror from the parents. You know, the kids didn't seem to bat an eyelid. There weren't any tears, there weren't any cries, there was nothing.
Can you run? I think not.
But what did affect us was the passion and conviction with which the tale was told. We were completely besotted by the life of these rabbits on screen.
That was a good idea of yours, Blackberry.
Yes. Let's try to remember it. It might come in handy again.
The original idea, as I perceived it, was that the animation would all be done, and then the animators would all be kicked out, and then the paint and trace girls would come, or paint and trace departments, usually girls, would come in and take over the space we had, and then paint the film. But because of the sort of this hiccup in the middle, it meant that the animation sort of virtually started again. So they hired a basement, and suddenly that was filled up with personable young ladies, and the social life picked up enormously.
Yeah, it did. Apart from the girls who were down there, we did actually start to see the film in colour, whereas all we had seen was line test. So, yeah.
It was great. You walk into paint and trace, and it was like a galley slave situation with smoke hanging from the ceiling, women toiling away with paintbrushes. That was great.
Yeah.
Alan and Colin. And we all got on well anyway. We were a good bunch. And it would be drinks after the film in the evening and maybe lunch. But they came down and they used to see what we were doing, and they were interested. They were interested in everything that we were doing, other than particular scenes that were they were animating. You know, they always wanted to see what the backgrounds were like and who was doing this, who was doing that. It was a huge warehouse they had hired for us to work in. You know, it was a bit run down. It was very tacky.
It was cheap.
Cheap, cold, but it was cheerful.
I mean, like all animation studios, all you need is a light box, a desk to work at.
A pub nearby.
And a pub nearby, yes. we had both of those, so that was fine. Yeah. No, they weren't state-of-the-art, but it wasn't bad, was it? Well, except for the rats.
John Hurt was walking up the stairs, and I recognised him instantly. And he said, you know, which floor is Watership down on? And I said, it's on the top floor. And then he cracked this joke about it being like a rabbit warren. And I thought, well, that's a new one. I mean, you know, so that was John Hurt.
Yeah, and of course,
he was all right.
Of course the studio was actually in Warren Street.
I do have a lot of grandchildren, and I thought it'd be good for the grandchildren, quite honestly. I mean, I've got 31 grandchildren. In fact, I think a few more would like to catch up with Watership Down, because quite a few now won't have seen it. And that's why I'm excited about the DVD coming out.
We keep in touch with other guys from the film.
I'd say about half a dozen of us keep in touch.
The group of us who went over to San Francisco as well, from having worked on Watership Down, we then worked on Plague Dogs. So that meant that we were all kind of thrown together in a foreign country.
Consolidated our love for each other. But also, we kind of tend to work on things anyway. I mean, you kind of...
Animation's a small
industry. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So, yes, we've all kept in touch.
Most of us.
Well, some of us.
Hardly any of us.
Come back anytime. And thank you, Kiha.